what we're going to do today, so I put that link in there one more time, is we're going to go over 50 ways to use G Suite for educators. Now, it was previously called G Suite, but now it's going to be called Google Workspaces, I believe, but I just kept it G Suite because that's what we know it as, right? So we're going to be digging into different components to the each of the different Google tools. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going over these tools today. So we're going to look at Docs, we're going to look at Meet, and Forms, Sheets, Slides, Cites, Chrome, Classroom, Drive, all of those things, and have about 4 to 5 little tips and tricks on those while we go along, okay? If you could just give me a very quick yes in the chat if you can hear me well. I am hooked up to a different microphone, so I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. We good? Okay, cool. So I see a lot of yeses. I'm feeling good about that. And hopefully for live streamers. So let's start out with Google Docs. Now, when you do get this, I'm going to go back really fast. When you do get this slide deck, you're going to be able to click on any of these and they're going to link to that piece of the actual slide deck. Okay, so in here, once I go to Google Docs, these are going to link to the things that we're going to cover in Google Docs. Okay, so just how this slide deck is set up. That way, you know, when you get your own copy, then you know how the links all work. So here are some different ways that you can use Google Docs. And if you see the word remote after it, that means that these are tools that you can use for remote instruction as well as in class, okay?
Can we just pause for 1 second? I'm sorry, this is the interpreter and my deaf person's having a hard time finding me. If we could just pause for 1 second so that we can get accessibility for our disability people, that would be great.
That would be wonderful. One of the things that is going to help with that too is on Google Meet. It's going to pull up anyone who has their camera on first. So you guys, could you please, please, please turn off your cameras so that way we can see our interpreter right there on the top. So I'm going to pause for a second. Martha, can you talk just really quick so that make sure you bounce to the top?
Sure. Hopefully it pops into the top.
Okay, so now you and I should be at the top right now, I think. All right, thank you guys. Thank you, Martha. Awesome. Okay, so we are going to be looking at Hyperdocs and student choice boards. So on the Hyperdocs, what that basically means, and so I'm going to go here to this Google Doc, and I'm hoping it pulls it up quick, is you are creating an entire lesson within a doc itself, and you are adding links. So if I go here to insert in a doc, and I go to link, I can link to outside things. I can link to other websites, videos, all of that can be inside one Google Doc. And so students can go through this in a Hyperdoc, and that's one way that you can use Google Docs. Another way that you can use Google Docs is through a student choice board. So take those links the same way, and you're going to have a student choice board here, and students can choose any of these items and go out to those activities and complete them. So you can make this like a tic-tac-toe. You can make this sort of like in a row. So you can have students have choice using those Google Docs. Okay. Now, going back to my screen, once I share this with you, if you click on any of these links, it'll force a copy. It's called force copy, and you'll be able to have your own copy of all of these. So I'm going to share that at the very end. Another way to use Google Docs is to share it. So if you're in a doc and you share where everyone can edit, everyone in the class can pull in, sort of like how we used to do those jigsaw activities with groups, but this way they can actually write in all of their notes in their section, and it'll create one huge article note piece from all of the students. Okay, so that's another way that you can use this. The next way that you can use Google Docs is for research. So if students are researching, Google Docs has some built-in tools that are absolutely amazing. So I'm going to go to this doc to show them to you. Down here on the bottom right is the Explore tool. If you've never played with this, you click on Explore and you're able to search right from the doc itself, the internet, because, you know, Google's trying to run the world. But if I go here to Turtle, I'm going to find a website here that looks up turtles. And if I scroll down, it's just taking a minute to pop up, I can find all of the articles right here on turtles. I can add that information right to my paper. And if I hover over this corner, I can cite that right here in my text, and it'll put it here as a footnote. You can do the same thing with images that are Creative Commons images. I can add that right here to my text. It will add the image with the link of where the image came from. So that was, once again, the Explore tool down here on the bottom. What is new in Google Docs is if I go to Tools and I go to Citations, students or you, it depends on what you're doing. If you're writing a paper, you can do MLA, APA format, we're Chicago, and you can add different types of citations right here, and it will pull all of the things that you need to add in the correct order. It will cite it correctly inside the document, and it'll automatically create a bibliography. So that is another thing that you can do with Google Docs. Okay, so the first thing we explored right now was Google Docs. The next thing is if you want to focus on the writing process, or you want to save some different copies of something in a doc, if you go to File and then Version History, you'll be able to see all of the different versions of that document. And you can save those different versions throughout the process to show how something went from like a rough draft to a final copy. So for each one of these tools, the last thing I'm going to show you is sort of a did you know really quick tips and tricks, but they're going to be kept in an animated GIF or GIF format. So you might want to zoom into your screen a little bit. But if you go here, and one of these tips and tricks is if you type into the URL bar right here, so this is an animated GIF, so it's going to show you over and over again how to do it. You type in docs.new, it's going to automatically create a brand new doc. So you don't have to go through your drive. You don't have to go through all of your apps. You can just type in docs.new. Same thing for slides.new, forms.new, any of those, it'll automatically create a brand new one for you. Another thing is if you go into the tools menu, you can choose voice typing, where it will type out using your voice. Or under the same menu, if you go up here to tools, you can translate a document. So here you can select translate document, and you can choose from a huge mass of different languages, and it will create a translated copy and an English copy in your drive. The next thing you can do, which some people don't know that you can do, is if you have a handwritten letter or you hand wrote something and you go, oh, I need to type all of this out, take a picture of it and save it to your drive. Then right click on that in your drive, choose Open with Google Docs, and it will automatically convert all of that writing automatically into text. So it can convert any image into text, including posters and things. It will convert it to text, which is kind of neat. Oops, pause you. Come on. There we go. I'm going to skip the table of contents, but you can see how to add a table of contents later. And if you go to View, Show Equation Toolbar, you can actually create math equations within a Google Doc. So some people don't know that you can actually have math equations inside a Google Doc. So really fast and furious, like I said, those were all the different things that you can do, 5 different things that you can do with a Google Doc. If you had any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and I will try and answer them as I'm moving on to the next thing, kind of doing a double duty kind of thing, but some ideas for how to use Google Docs. Now let's talk about a Google Meet. Okay. Now, if I'm in a Google Meet, there are ways that you can use Google Meet a little bit differently. So one of those ways is to build relationships with check-ins or icebreakers at the very beginning. And yes, you will have access to this at the end. I totally am giving it to you. So at the beginning of a Google Meet, do really quick activities. So I'm going to link to this slide deck from there, and it has all of these games and ideas that you can play with a Google Meet, and we're going to be adding more to those later. So just like I said, have really quick icebreakers that are a minute long. Okay, the next one is making sure you have Meet etiquette. You should have expectations and procedures for a Google Meet. So we have a Google Meet poster you can show. There's a video where I absolutely make fun of myself and try and be every wrong student that's in a Meet, but have this posted every time you do a Meet to have students understand what those expectations are and just keep pushing them like you regularly do in a regular classroom. Another thing is to incorporate other Google tools into your Meets. Right now, if you go to your Meet and on the bottom right, there's 3 dots, you can add a Jamboard into a Google Meet. So that's what's kind of neat, is that you can incorporate that, but you can also add in Google Slides, you can have Google Docs, you can have a lot of those different things inside a Google Meet to make it a little bit more interactive. Going along with that, you can have breakout rooms. Some people don't realize there's actually 2 different types of breakout rooms. If you use a nickname Meet code, that can have a predetermined or ahead of time sort of Google Meet that you can use, or you can use a Google Meet, the built-in breakout rooms. But it's really fun to try and have those breakout activities. And in that tips and tricks slide deck, there's going to be some of those for you guys. If you want to learn more about Google Meet and breakout rooms, we have a session at EdTech that is Google Meet best practices. And so we go more in depth into some of those things. Some people don't realize that you can differentiate your instruction in a Google Meet. If you've ever seen a Bitmoji Classroom, they've kind of taken that to the next level with these doors. And so you can have a teacher help room. You can have an open group room, a quiet room, or a quiet group room, or a quiet room. And if you set these up as Meet links that are nickname Meets, students can click on whichever room they would like to go into. You can do this as well as with topics. You can do this with different group sizes. I've seen teachers do this for guided reading groups, incorporating Jamboard with it. So that is another idea of how you can use Google Meet. The last way that you can use Google Meet is incorporating gamification. Gamification is really big to build student engagement. So here are some different tools you can use to gamify instruction. GimKit is one of the newer ones, but if you've never tried out quizzes or Kahoot, students basically get a code and then they can compete against each other using those questions, like review questions or getting to know you questions or vocabulary. And they are, like I said, competing against each other, and they can see the leaderboard change automatically in real time. Kahoot's very similar, as well as Quizlet. Goose Chase is more like a digital scavenger hunt, and Pear Deck is an engagement tool that is used as an add-on. So we do have a Pear Deck one coming up next. All right, let's talk about Google Forms now, which is one of my absolute favorite apps. So here's some different ways and ideas to use Google Forms. And we do have a lesson on that later. So one way is you create those quizzes in Google Forms that automatically grade. I'm sure you probably already know this, and it's a great way to promote remote instruction. If you don't, take one of our Google Forms classes. But what you might not know is that you can add images in a Google Form as part of your quiz. So in this case, students have to decide, is this a physical or chemical change? And they can see it moving right here in an animated GIF/GIF, depending what team you're on, right here in the form itself. So they can look at this picture and determine that. They can look at this one and determine that. So that is another way that you can add that extra element to a Google form. Okay. Another way that we can use Google Forms is with bathroom passes, hall passes, or even like sign out sheets. So in this case, the form was created as a survey, but I used to have an iPad next to the exit of my classroom. And obviously we're not doing that right now, but they could choose their name And then they can choose where they were going and which location they were doing, so I can track bathrooms without having to make it where they even had to ask me at all. They just knew that they had to check out. Another way that I would have my students use Google Forms is I created behavior forms, kind of like a refocus form where the students would say what their behavior was, what they wanted when they had that behavior, and what they could have done differently. Now, what I like about this is that it will capture all of that data in a Google spreadsheet, and I can filter out or I can sort through that information. Then I can just pull out that particular student's info. And it was something that was absolutely amazing that I could share with parents when I talked about student behaviors. And then I also use this for stat packets. So that way they're in charge of going into that refocus form and using it. Then I can make a chart or a graph from that Google spreadsheet and I can use it for stat packets. One other thing that you can do, and this is really fun for remote learning, is you can create a branching. It's called logic branching Google form. So if you create sections, you can have the student pick one particular area and it will take them to that section. Now, one of the things I used to like to use this for, so I'm leaving that screen, I'm going back to this one, is students would write narratives, like a nonfiction narrative, and then they would create a Google form to match it. So I wrote about my trip to Disneyland was my narrative, and then they are able to experience it. So if a student chooses Tomorrowland, it's going to take them to the Tomorrowland page and they can explore Tomorrowland, versus if I go back and I choose something different like Fantasyland, and I choose that, it's going to take me to Fantasyland instead of Tomorrowland. So this is called logic branching. We do have a Google Forms training that will get more into that, and we're going to cover that a little bit this afternoon in that session. Another way that you can use Google
Forms. Just a minute, this is the other interpreter. I just want to make sure I've popped to the top of the screen to switch.
Oh, sure. Are we good? Can you talk one more time, Robert? Just say something real fast.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So another way that we can use Google Forms is there's something called response validation, and you can use that to create, I guess I'm going to leave. You can use that to create an escape room. So students can find clues. They can look at other websites. You can have links. And I put one in here that you guys can play with where it actually gives you the answer. But if I put the incorrect answer here, it'll say, try again. You're doing it incorrectly. You have to get the correct answer in order to move on to the next section. So it's very similar to the branching, but it's response validation where you can't move on unless you have the correct answer. So that's another way you can use Google Forms. Another way is if you create a question using something called a multiple choice grid, which is this one here, you can create this like a rubric. So you can have 1 to 5 points. You can have the criteria here on the side. And when you select it, it will compile that information. I loved to have students build this with me at the same time. And then we would all build it together on the screen. And then I would give this live link to students. Other students would present and they would grade each other with this rubric, and it would all be compiled onto a Google Sheet.
May I interject real quick?
Sure.
All of this is wonderful, but my students aren't readers. And is there a text-to-speech or something like that?
I'm going to do a I'm going to do a Google Forms and Sheets one later this afternoon. And I'm going to be covering an entire section on how to do Google Forms for littles. So you can add pictures in it. And then there's something called, so I'm just going to throw it in with you guys. It's called Talk and Comments. Let me see. I turn all my extensions off so I don't, I think I turned it off. but until I was doing it later. It's called Talk and Comment Extension, and it will allow you to create recordings where students can play, and they'll be able to listen to those instructions and then listen to words. So I created like an actual digraph Google form that's like the sh sound. And so students can hear them and then match that with the picture. So email me and I can get that to you if you want to take a look at it.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Google Forms, did you know? You can go to responses, make sure you're signed in as yourself, and then you can set this up through these 3 dots to get emails anytime someone responds. So if you do have a parent page or you have something where you are taking surveys of information, you can set it up where you receive notifications for that. You can create a link to form response charts. I'll have you guys look at that later because it's a little bit more complicated where you have to do like printing and stuff. Today, I gave you a sign-in sheet where I gave you a pre-filled link. So if you're inside a form and you pick these 3 dots, you can get a pre-filled link, which basically means you fill out any part of the question you already know you want that specific answer for. You select Get Link, and it will create a link where all those sections are already filled out. Okay? Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm trying to watch 2 things at the same time. But and now you can import a question from another form. So if you haven't played with that, go ahead and check it out in Google Forms. And now we're going to be talking about Google Sheets. Google Sheets I used a little bit more for organizing myself and keeping myself a little bit more sane, but it can be used with students or for students in a certain regard. So on this slide deck, I'm going to give you a link to do 2 different rubrics I had created. You can go ahead and change all of this information if you want. Now, if you are a grammar person, this is going to stab you in the heart just a tiny bit. Okay, so don't get too upset. But if you notice, there is no punctuation here. This is the only way I could figure out how to do this. But if you say a student is doing really well on their cover page, and you can change all this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a period in whatever area those students did well. So that was a 4, that was a 3. I'm going to say this is a 4. You're going to notice it's automatically going to fill in those particular areas, and it's automatically going to calculate a score. So this is a Google Sheet. It has a fairly complicated formula right here that I already did. So anywhere that you put a period at the end of that box is going to be where it's going to fill out that rubric. So what I used to do is I used to go to File, make a copy, make one for every student, and then I would add the link to that and send it to a parent. And it was so easy to fill out while a student was presenting or doing something because all of the contents here, all you have to do is put a period, add some comments, and then send off that link. So that's one way you can use Google Sheets. Another way that you can use Google Sheets is creating a gradebook. I know Synergy has a gradebook. Google Classroom has a gradebook, but I just liked having this gradebook that I can sort, I can color code, I can put different formulas in. So this was kind of an example, of my gradebook. So I had subtracting numbers, adding place value, and then it would move down to all of these different areas. And then on the test, I put which different standards it was. So that's just another way you can use one. Another way, though, is I created something called RTI, group sheet. And so for each individual math test, I had the rubric at the very front. And this rubric for all of these different content areas and which questions they were matched a pre-test and post-test I created on a Google Sheet. So we're going to pretend these students have names, and this is multiplying whole numbers. This is reading and writing numbers. And so let's say a student got 4 out of 6 answers correct. The student got 2 out of 3 answers correct. It creates a percentage. Now, I know we don't really take percentages when I did elementary, but what I liked about this is you can turn on this filtering option up here, and it just automatically filters. And I can go here to this filter drop down. I can clear it off. And I can select any students that have grades that are in a certain range. So like 67 to 0 or something. And I'll put OK. And now it's only going to pull up those students. So then I can say, okay, I need to work with student 3, whatever that student's name is, on this or on this standard. Okay, so it very much filtered out those groups very quickly. And then I built those RTI groups here and was able to keep assessing them over time to see if they got better at that particular area. So I gave you guys a copy of that if you want to modify it or play with it. Another thing, it's been blocked and unblocked and blocked and unblocked. So I'm just going to hope that they unblocked it again, is flippity.net, which is a website that if you add in information to a Google Sheet and you publish it to the web, as long as you use one of their templates, it will automatically create these things for you. So it'll create matching games, student name pickers. It will create bingo cards that are digital, board games that are digital, a leaderboard, and it has all of these things that are pulled straight from a Google Sheet. So some things about Google Sheets you might not know about is try and use that Explore tool very similar to Google Docs, but instead it is through Google Sheets. It can help figure out some of those formulas for you. So if you say like count the number of people in Gryffindor, in this case, it will automatically calculate that for you without you even having to put in a formula. You can create those filter views. I showed you that filter button a minute ago. If you go to that little drop-down arrow to the right, I'm waiting for it to pull up, right here on this, you can actually save different views based on how you're filtering out information. If you've never used conditional formatting in Sheets, or you've just never used Sheets, if you select a row or a column sometimes, you can go up here to Format, go to Conditional Formatting, and it'll automatically create color scales where you can easily see data based on high, medium, or low, because it's going to be color coded for you, and it's going to give you that range automatically. So I'll show you real quick what that looks like. So you can see highs, mediums, and lows on that data. Okay, this one's a big one. We're only going to touch on some of them because some of them you might know about. But here's some different ways you can use Google Slides. So on Google Slides, we do have a set creating a Bitmoji Classroom, so I'm not going to get into that a lot. It's kind of a phase right now. It's like a fad. Is on a Google Slide, you can create links to images, share this published image out to your students, and students can click on all of these links that are active in a Bitmoji Classroom. And Bitmoji, it's where you, and every single one of my slides has a random Bitmoji on it. They are these little sort of avatar people that you can create. Students cannot create them. They have to be older. It is like technically a social media app, but teachers can use them. Another way you can use Google Slides is create digital notebooks or digital data binders. So what's nice is Slides Mania, if you've never been to Slides Mania, and you'll get a link here once this is through, they have dates and not dates, they have templates, sorry. Some of them have notebooks set up like this with like dates and tabs. Some of them are actual presentations. Some of them are science notebooks, but they all have the links already created on these templates for you to use as a data binder. You can have students present their screen while they record. So that's another way you can use Google Slides, is you can create presentations when students record their screen. If students have iPads, we do have a couple videos that show parents how to turn on that camera so students can record themselves while they're presenting on their screen. If they're using Seesaw, that's also available for them through that. I have a flashcard template here where students can create flashcards and they can keep going through those flashcards for practice. Works really great for multiplication facts. Holy cow, That's what it was. So that works out really well for those ones. I don't know if you remember the era of PowerPoint when it was way popular about I don't know, I've taught for 15 years, so I'm thinking it's probably longer than I think. They created a lot of PowerPoint games like Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and now they've taken a lot of those slides and converted them over to Google. So you can find those here. There's the Jeopardy slides template, but they've created a lot more. And then there's some Teachers Pay Teachers slides too, if you'd like to look at them. So this is one of my favorite ones for Google Slides, and they're interactive activity menus. Great for remote learning, very similar to that Google Docs student choice, but this time it's created through a Google slide. So on each of these, they're linked to a different slide. So as a student, you have to choose an entree, an appetizer, a dessert, and a beverage. So they can choose any of these things. So if I choose that I want to do a Google slide presentation, if I click on that, it's automatically going to take me to that Google slide information and how I complete my activity, plus a video, and then I can go back to that main menu and then choose my appetizer. So this time I want to use something here. I'm going to look at how to do this, what the project is, make sure I complete that, and then I'll pick something from the beverage place. So I'm going to dress up and present whatever it is I'm doing. So there will be a link to this actual activity menu. I believe I forced a copy of that too, so I'm hoping that that was there. I'll double check that before we leave. You can also use that similar linking of different slides to have students create their own apps. So what I mean by that, and my child actually created this one. They did a project with Watermelon Mountain Ranch. They actually presented at ISTE, which was kind of cool, is if you click on this image, it links to a specific slide. So then they submit it. And then if you click on adoption, it's going to go to an adoption page and explain the animals you want to adopt. So if you want to adopt a dog, that's going to link somewhere. And so all of these pieces link. So this one links to fostering. This one leads to donating. So all of these things link to different locations on this slide deck. So it makes it essentially like an app. So another way to use Google Slides is to create lessons that embed right into a Google site. So if you embed a lesson, it's going to look very much to this published lesson right here that I have on a Google slide. Students can choose which slides they're going to go to. They can move forward and backwards down here. So you can embed those inside a Google site to create that flipped classroom. Another thing is look at add-ons. We do have a Pear Deck lesson or session here coming up. We don't have Nearpod for free for the districts, but we got Pear Deck, so hence we're kind of focusing more on Pear Deck. I do love Nearpod, though it has a lot of free pieces. They are add-ons through a Google slide. So if you go to add-ons and choose Pear Deck, it will create interactive questions and interactive slides while you're presenting the lesson, as well as for asynchronous instruction where students go through it on their own. So let's talk a little bit about Google Slides. This page later on, if you want to look at the animated GIF, will show you how to add a theme to your Google Slides. So I ended up adding this sort of Google looking theme to my slides. So you just have to go to background and then choose a theme. It is a little bit more complicated because you have to like search through what you want, but you can add a theme to your Google Slides. You can also create a link to a presentation view. To do that, you're going to want to go up to File. I'm waiting for this to load, sorry. Go here to File, Publish to the Web, and you're going to publish it, and you're going to get a link. When you get that link, it will give students the actual published version of the presentation, not the one where they can change things or the one where it looks like it's the build of the Google slide deck, but the actual published version where you'll have this bar down here where you can go through stuff. Okay. Take advantage of audience tools. You can go to present, hit presenter view, and what you might not know built in is it has audience tools. So students will be able to ask questions while there's a presentation. I used to like using this when my students presented, so that way they can open up this new link and students can get on and ask questions while the other students are presenting. So if you have a really shy student who's afraid to answer or be part of the presentation, they can be the person who answers all the questions. Okay, let's get into using Google Sites. So here's some different ways you can build Google Sites and use them. One way is create a teacher portfolio. I don't want to say how many times this has helped me out, but it has. So on my homepage of my portfolio, it has information about me. And then I can add any certifications I have. I can add my resume. I can add exemplars of things that I've done in my classroom. Here I've kept it with more resources for teachers because I do use this with some Google groups I'm in. But it really helps kind of sell yourself if you are looking for another position, or also you can start keeping your information here for your teacher evaluations. Just keep updating it, and then in the end, you don't have to upload a ton of stuff to your evaluation frontline. You can just hand off your site. So that usually helped me. Another way to use Google Sites is have students create portfolios as well. This is my child's portfolio. So she's kept it from kindergarten because we presented this at ISTE a couple years ago too. So she's a little bit about a year off. But what her goal was when she was little, and she added a lot of pictures and we typed for her, obviously. And then you keep building that up and having a page for every year until you get up to that next higher level information. So there's recorded projects. Now you can see how the art's changed. You can see like activities she's involved in. There's her writing pieces. There's volleyball. She's in sports. So there's another way you can do that. And we do have templates for students if you would like to look at that on our website. Now
we're going to switch interpreters really quick.
Yep, go for it.
Try and get my name to the top.
Name to the top.
Can you see me? Am I at the top? Sorry, just trying to move my bubble.
You are in my screen, but it's hard to tell other people's screens. So, all right. So on the classroom site, you can create a classroom site, and that can be very much used by parents. So I do have a link on here to my old classroom site. I really liked adding in videos, instructional videos, links to Google Forms that were quizzes, any images of things we were doing in class, like science experiments that we were incorporating or doing in our classroom. So I usually added a lot of that onto my site. You can also use a Google site for PD. So if you're a principal, if you're an instructional coach, if you're a TLF, if you want to create a Google site and have an agenda kept here as one of those categories, it's really nice to be able to go back and reference and have links in all of those documents in one place. So that's another way that you can use Google Sites. Okay. You can use Google Sites and create digital escape rooms. We do have a training on that as well, so I'm not going to get into that in a lot of detail, but you can create a Google site and have it be a digital escape room. So some little facts about Google Sites is if you are creating a Google site, my advice is to embed from the right bottom. Now, the reason I say that is because if you're creating a site and you're just automatically pulling things in, it doesn't make them interactive actually interactive or embedded inside the site sometimes. So what I mean by that is over here on this right bar, so right now I'm adding a YouTube video. On this right bar, add things through here because it will automatically create that embed link when you're creating a Google site. Another thing is if you double click when you're building a site, it will create a wheel so you don't have to come back here. So if you double click, it will have a wheel here where you can add things right from where you clicked. So that's kind of nice. Another known fact, if you create sites, if you don't change your share permissions on a site, they will not work on the website itself. So go to an incognito window that's up here in this corner and use that published link, and you're going to be able to see what everyone else sees, not through your account. So you're going to see that this link was actually broken. So my advice is to try your published site inside an incognito window, and you can tell if your site permissions are set up correct or not. Okay, using Google Chrome, here's just a few ideas for how to use Google Chrome. There's just 3 of them. First of all, if I go here to a new tab on my screen, it's going to look like Disneyland. So I went to the Chrome Web Store, which you just have to search for Chrome Web Store. And that is going to allow you to go to themes, and you can pick some themes. And you can have different themes. You don't have to, but here's why I like it. I have 2 different personal accounts. I have an account through our business with my husband. I have my personal account, and I have my work account. And I don't know if sometimes you've accidentally thrown something into your personal account and you get annoyed because you thought it was your work account. So if you have different Chrome themes, you'll automatically know which one you're in because it looks different. Okay, fair warning for Chrome themes. Some of them will change your search browser, so I like to find the ones that for sure say Google on them. So if I click this one, and I like to see if there's been a lot of people who've given it stars, and I like to read reviews. So if I look at it and I go, this one seems to make it run slow, or if I see that not many people used it or it wasn't very good, I will steer clear of it because these are created by other people versus this Nighttime in New York has 17,000 people who've used it. So I feel pretty good about that one, okay? Another thing with Chrome is adding extensions. Some of them will be blocked, so we have to get them cleared. But like OneTab, I use OneTab up here. I use the Screencastify extension a lot. I use Bitmoji a lot. So there are just some extensions that you can use to make your browser run a little bit differently. You can add Pear Deck, you can have Moat. So here's just a few of them. I do use this puzzle piece here, and I make sure and unpin them, or I disable them when I'm presenting. So that way my system runs faster. Whoops. Another thing is add-ons. Add-ons are a little bit different than extensions. Add-ons actually work with the tool itself. So you have a Pear Deck add-on in Slides. You have a Kaizen add-on in Docs. So I have these on here so you can check out some of them and what they add to. So some facts about Google Chrome is if you right-click on a tab, I'm going to right-click on this, you can pin it so you don't accidentally close it. So right-click on it again to unpin it. Another thing is if you go into the Google search and you search for things like flip a coin, roll dice, having a spinner, that can be up on your screen automatically. I don't know if you've ever noticed a timer, it will pull one of those up too. So it automatically pulls it on the screen. They're called widgets, Omnibox widgets, but that's what it looks like. Another thing that's new is if you right click on a tab, not up there, if you right click on a tab, you can add a tab to a group. So if I add it to a group, it's going to actually color code those depending on what level of Chrome you have. And since I'm in a beta because I'm a trainer, I think I have the expanding and contracting, but that should be rolling out to other people. So you can actually color code them and keep them all together. The last thing is going to be Google Classroom. Here are some ways that you can set up Google Classroom. Okay, so here's some ideas. Is I used to, once my students got good at Google Classroom, I started creating other Google Classrooms for specific things. So one of them was for a book club. So I had students where I had traditional literature, fiction text, and then I just put like plot elements and climax. So it wasn't a specific book, but it was a specific theme or ideas that students wanted to discuss from whatever book they were reading. And so I always set these up as questions so they can ask each other and reply to each other when they actually had their books that they were reading. Okay. Another way I set up Google Classroom is to have a classroom for the beginning of the year. So I had a classroom that told students activities that they can do. I set one up for a digital beginning of the year and how to use digital tools. So it teaches students, I don't know if it's this one, I think it's this one. It teaches students like what parent forms we're gonna go over, back to school scavenger hunt, a name tag lift, and I really add in here very quick ways on how to use Google Classroom. So that was another reason I set up a separate one for the beginning of the year, because if students mess things up or it got all messed up, it was okay to have that one before we started the real one. You can set up a Google Classroom for a flipped classroom. So when I give you this link, you can actually enroll in all these classes and check them out if you'd like as a student. So it has a lot of videos and how you can flip it. And I also created a early finisher classroom. So if a student finished early in reading or finished early in math, they can pick any of these activities that they would like to complete. On their end, it would be whited out once they've completed it, so they knew that they can pick any of these when they finished early. Okay, so there's just some different ideas. Try to set up Google Classroom for remote learning. There's some tips and tricks. So if you want to check this out, naming conventions, setting up assignments and activities, that's all going to be in here. And the last thing with Google Classroom is if you use Google Classroom with comments. I don't know if you've tried this before. Sometimes it's hard to figure out how to get those comments out of the comment bank. What the trick is you want to use a hashtag. So if you add a comment and you have it from the comment bank, start your comment with a hashtag and it'll pull all the comments from your comment bank that are kept over here for you. You can organize Google Classroom with emojis by right-clicking and then adding in emojis and symbols, and then you can have those images in your Google Classroom. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to do Drive. I already hit 50, but when you get this, you guys can check out how you can organize your Drive and find files, because I know that we're done and I want to value your time. I'm right at the end. So when you get this, I gave you some PLN people I follow a lot on Twitter. Please fill out this feedback form. I'm not going to have you all do it because then you're going to hang out here forever and I want you to have a lunch and like a life. So there's a Google Doc format in this link. Please fill out this feedback form at some point though, because I very much appreciate it. I know it was fast. I know it was a lot of stuff. I'm going to be giving it to you though right now. But the feedback form is on that very last slide. I also have a link to our calendar from EdTech for any future trainings we're having. We're going to be doing how to teach hybrid sessions in January and February. So click on that link to check those out, or through PowerSchool. You can request a training at your school with just us to come to your school or work with a small group of people. If you have a question, I know I couldn't order a ton of, answer a ton of questions in the chat. Thank you for not bombarding me. That was nice. I will go ahead and answer that through that form if you want to do it. And I'm trying to get that link right now. Sorry. I'm trying to do two things at once. And we have a YouTube channel as well as our website. So over here, I am pasting. I almost pasted the sign-in sheet, so that's why it took me a minute because I didn't want the wrong one. If you click on the link right here that is in the chat, and I will be emailing this out to everybody who signed up on PowerSchool. So I'm going to have a follow-up email with all of these links, as well as the link to the presentation itself if you just missed it. But in the chat, if you want to copy that link and take it, it's an entire published version of everything that we just covered. So double check if someone grabs it and opens it that it does work. Let me know yes or no, because I did make a bit.ly of it like right now. And I didn't have time to triple check it, which I normally do. So thank you, Sarah.
Yes, it works.
Yay! All right. So like I said, fairly fast and furious, medium fast speed. I never was able to breathe yet though, but hopefully those are some different ideas, tips, tricks, and things that you can use.